All right, so these are the topics that we'll be going through gradually, one by one. Let us today understand the importance of vectors. So when we are talking about data, how is data stored in computers? So the avatar of data on the machine are arrays. So data is stored in the form of arrays. An array is a vector for us. So the mathematical avatar of a vector an array is a vector. Our first introduction to vectors in the school days was as a physical quantity which has a magnitude and a direction. So in mathematics it happens to be a geometrical object depicted by an arrow. So the direction of the arrow is supposed to be the direction of the vector, and the magnitude is proportional to the length. So let us first try to understand vectors in the two-dimensional setting. So let us say this is a vector, and this vector is the vector u. Normally we put a bar in schools or an arrow on top of the symbol, but we will avoid that. So what do you do with the set of vectors? There are certain operations which one does on vectors. So for example, adding two vectors, multiplying the vector by a scalar, for example alpha times u, and so on. We want to do all this very conveniently, and a placeholder kind of concept is very convenient for doing all these things. So for example, the vector u could be something like alpha I plus beta j. So when you write something like this, so for example, if we are talking about this vector u, if I impose the axis, the x-axis and the y-axis, I is a unit vector along the x direction, j is a unit vector along the y direction. So what is this saying? It is saying that you take alpha times this, so you stretch the vector I by amount alpha, so it happens to be up to this. So look at the projection of this. So this is alpha times I, and to that you're adding another vector which is beta times j, that is j stretched by an amount beta. So when you come up to this, so this is beta times j, and the addition of these two vectors is this vector. So this vector therefore can be thought of as the point with coordinates alpha and beta. The first position, the first component corresponds to the direction along the x-axis, and the second component along the y-axis. And so this is the notation for a point. As a vector, we treat this to be equivalent to alpha beta, this column vector or the column matrix. This is precisely the notion of your array. So in an array, what one has, so you can have a column vector. So this is something which we have in it's very convenient to represent a vector on the machine with the help of an array. These two are absolutely parallel concepts. In fact, the entire MATLAB software has been constructed on the idea of matrices. And now we quickly discuss matrices. An image, for example, a two-dimensional image, can be thought of as a matrix. So though you have the matrix to be a 2x2 array in the parlance of computing language, mathematically you are having a sequence of numbers A11, A12 and so on, A1n, A21, A22, A2n and so on, an, m1, a, m2 and so on up to amn. In many processing tasks, what one does is one converts this into a column vector. So what you can do is you can start with the first column. So you write down A11, A12 and so on, go up to A1n and then you start with the second row, A21, and you keep doing this. So in this way you get an array which has got how many rows? It will have m into n rows and one column. So for many processing things, processing tasks, you can do something like this. So the fundamental object for us are going to be vectors, and one should understand few important concepts related with vectors. So what are the things that we should know about vectors? So few of the things that we should know about vectors are: linear dependence or independence, we should know what vector spaces are, what vector subspaces are, vector spaces and vector subspaces. We should know the meaning of dimension of a vector space. All right. And after one has familiarity with these things, one should look at matrices as functions or operators. So till before this we tried to understand a matrix as an array, but now it has another role to play, and a very, very important role to play, as a function or as an operator. And we will see how matrices are important in solving system of